Hello, welcome to ControllerCast. On this podcast, I talk with peers about all things, everything video games. Feel free to respond and chat with me on our social media, and also check out my YouTube channel, TP Game, for other gaming content in the background. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Hey, this is ControllerCast episode number 3. In this podcast, we talk about all things video games. And in this episode, I am joined by Spencer and Tony. You can find Tony at the Yum channel on YouTube, and you can find me at TP Game on Twitch and YouTube. I do all sorts of gaming content and music content and some other wacky stuff here and there. So check that out. Today, we will cover esports and competitive gaming. How's it going, guys?
Good. Doing good today.
Okay, so I guess my first question for you, I guess this doesn't really have to do much about esports necessarily, but I guess what are some of your favorite games to play, just generally, right now?
Currently, my favorite games to play are games like League, Sea of Thieves, GTA. I'm not really sure. I don't really game anymore.
Okay, what about you, Spencer?
I'd say that I bounce around a lot. I go between very competitive games unintentionally. I don't really play them for the competitive side, like Apex Legends and League of Legends, but I like a single player game every now and then, though I think probably my favorite right now is Hunt Showdown, because that game is competitive yet very, very casual, and that's what makes it the best.
Yeah, I actually retract what I say. I do actually game, because now that he brought up Hunt Showdown, I actually remember I played a ton of that, and I really like the game. It's casually competitive, but I think it's really well balanced, and I don't think they should touch it anymore.
All about competitive gaming and esports. Well, esports, of course, didn't used to be very popular.
I'm sorry, which game?
Esports, just in general. And then, competitive gaming, there's tons of different kinds of, games that have gone the competitive route that didn't used to be the competitive route. I guess a great example that I think we're most of us familiar with is Smash Bros.
Yeah.
Every Smash Bros. Game didn't used to be really a competitive thing.
I mean, they never were intended to be. Not even the ones now. I mean, they humor the competitive crowd when they make them, but the game has always been supposed to be a casual party game that other people make competitive.
I know you're trying. I don't want to go on to a huge rant about that, whether or not it is, but I think that that's a good example of it doesn't matter what the devs want. Melee is one of the most popular esports, and yet it's older than most of the people who play games. So it's interesting. I think that, the devs didn't build it to be competitive, but it's definitely a competitive game.
Yeah, and that's funny considering that a lot of the things that are used to play competitive Melee now were
not even intended by the devs.
Yeah, they're almost unintended, almost kind of glitches in the code, or not really glitches in the code, but
exploits.
Yeah, exploits of
they are. They're exploits and glitches.
And it's very weird to me, but it's also, it's kind of interesting how people have discovered these nuances and used it to create a new meta of how to play competitive Smash. Because I used to play Melee, and it's definitely pretty crazy some of the stuff that you have to do just to even just get by.
I mean, if we had people who figure out a glitch in GTA San Andreas to 100% the game by smashing into a wall over and over again, even though that wasn't intended to the game, those people would competitively play a broken version of the game. I think people find competitiveness where they can basically make it.
Yeah.
Just sort of unfortunate in my opinion, but it's also kind of interesting at the same time.
Yeah.
And also, Super Smash Bros. Melee originally was an unfinished game. They actually didn't fully complete the build for the game. So
I did not know that.
And they haven't touched it since. They obviously don't update the game. Of course,
well, that definitely sheds some light on how I feel about Melee players now.
Of course, there's mods and stuff now. Of course, a bunch of things you can do, and you can play online with the emulators and stuff like that. But yeah,
no, that's a huge topic. I think just in general, because I think Tarkov, actually, Escape from Tarkov, it's this first-person shooter that's kind of like a battle royale, but looter shooter, kind of like DayZ. But
right, okay.
The weird thing about it is it's kind of like Melee, where despite it gets updates constantly, the devs don't frown upon kind of glitching the game in some ways. One of the most popular things on one of the maps is that you have to use keys to get into a lot of the loot rooms. So keys are very expensive, and if you want to save money where you can, and there's actually a way to jump out of one of the windows on a building and enter the room that's locked, and the devs have never removed that. Despite knowing about that.
They're aware. Okay.
It's literally the most popular thing because then snipers know about that, so they'll watch that spot. But people rush to that spot, and they'll glitches like that are left in the game. So it's an interesting thing to kind of watch devs. Because granted, I guarantee if Melee was able to be updated, there would not be half the stuff that's in.
Yeah, no, I
it would not be nearly as popular as it is.
Then some other devs, even in competitive games, will say, well, that's fine. Like CSGO, switching to your knife after firing a bolt-action rifle. Like, it's faster than
unscoping.
Than unscoping. And so people do that, and the devs leave it in. So that's definitely, something that is interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I guess a question is, where do you guys, and you guys can answer this however you want, how do you guys think, competitive gaming, where did it first enter the gaming industry? How did gaming, competitive gaming start? I don't know the answer. So
I think it's a very open-ended question.
So I guess I'll just jump in because I do kind of know this answer. Because I used to be really into esports back when I originally tried to do college, and I did a couple reports on it. And the early starting of it, I think it shows that if there's ever something that people can compete in, because it doesn't just go back to the start of gaming. I think it goes back to the start of humans and how sports have been something forever. There's never not really been a society within the world that hasn't had some form of competition, whether that's sports or duels and or wars and things like that. I think it's what makes it continue to this day is that in gaming, people like competition. People like proving that they're better. People like going against people that are unpredictable. And it will always continue to happen. And it really started back with LAN parties in the early 90s, back when multiplayer games started becoming a thing. StarCraft, the original Counter-Strike, Halo. LAN parties were a huge place for that. Granted, it wasn't at the scale nor, I think, the competitiveness that it is now. But people wanted to see if they were better than other people. And that continued through the early 90s, early 2000s into actual StarCraft matches being worth millions of dollars in prize pools and huge teams starting. There was a crash for esports in the early 2000s after that. But I think it definitely just started with the fact that people could compete against each other.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And for me, I kind of have three categories that I kind of just came up with myself, but I kind of say games. I have one being games that were kind of designed to be competitive, like League, that's kind of designed to be a team-based kind of competitive game because they're competing against other people. That's the main, thing of the game. That's the main mode of the game. And then there are games that were not designed to be competitive, but have found their way into the competitive scene, fun party games like Smash Bros. And things like that. And then another thing, I guess, are just single player games. They're they're speed runs, competing for the fastest time on,
any game,
any kind of game, you'll eventually occasionally hear, oh, this so and so by this username just beat the world record on speed running, whatever.
Well, speed running is crazy. The newest thing in Mario 64 for speed running is blind speed running.
Oh yeah. Mario 64, a huge one.
But
yeah,
you blind speedrun it. You literally cover your eyes and play the game and beat the game.
Yeah, can we talk about that for a second? How? You literally have to perfectly
I guess if you've learned how to speedrun it, just normally, because those guys who are speedrunning at that have basically got it down to a millisecond science. You pretty much know where you need to be going by just feel. Not much changes.
It's literally feel and sound audio because Mario makes certain noises if he touches walls or touches things or drops off of things or walks on certain type of terrain and then feel within the controller. And so they go off of that for cues on where they are, what's going on. It's insane.
Oh, okay.
Because they literally caught a guy faking it. And that's how they kind of told with him is that they compared it against how you normally do versus how he was doing it.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm just like, how much time does that take to get
think
that to get that down to a science?
I think it's a full-time job.
Well,
and
yeah.
I think that's why people Twitch stream it, is because you got to make some kind of income on it. Like, I think you have to really commit to that.
No, you have to go full bore for that.
I mean, I guess I didn't really answer where I thought esports came from.
I gave a general answer, but if you're talking about like how you did with like the 3 types, that's something completely different.
Well, I was just adding that. I was adding that as kind of a separate thing.
Because I think that's where a lot of problems come from with esports.
Yeah, wait, what were you gonna say, Tony?
Well, the question was, where did you think esports got its start? And I didn't.
Yeah, like where do you think it really like? I guess you can take it one of 2 ways. I guess where did it like officially start, or where did it become big? Like,
I mean, I'm probably incredibly biased in this sense, and this isn't me saying all of esports. I wanted to say the peak of where I think esports came from was probably during the early days of Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Now, Counter-Strike isn't new, and it's the way the player base takes the game seriously isn't new either. And by new, I mean 2013 when CSGO came out. Like, Counter-Strike Source had already been around. There had already been several different Counter-Strike titles, and people took them very seriously. But it wasn't really a ranked mode, and they kind of operated on a more traditional, you just join a private server kind of thing and people play. CSGO really streamlined the whole process with servers, and then also created a very, very competitive, just how it's built, a competitive elo system for their ranked mode and their placement matches. And I think because of that, they definitely attracted a lot of hardcore Counter-Strike fans that had already been, prepping for years. Counter-Strike's been around since the 90s. Basically, people who had understood how, because the Counter-Strike games are slightly different from one another, but the core principles are the same. They basically attracted all these people who had been honing their skills in this game and pretty much bringing them to a gauntlet where they can actually put those skills to use, because, CSGO tournaments that have cash prizes, those started popping up after CSGO came out. Valve really wanted CSGO to become a competitive game. It wasn't just to be the next installment in the Counter-Strike franchise. Wow. It was to be a competitive game.
So Global Offensive. That's what they were aiming for with that.
I think so too. And
completely.
Completely. Global Offensive didn't coincidentally become a competitive game that Valve ran with. When they designed Global Offensive, they knew it was going to be an esport, and that was with it in mind.
We're going to build our game centered around that idea.
I don't even think they saw it as an esport, but more as a more competitive game.
Well, yeah, probably. I think they definitely wanted to reward players that have been playing the game forever by giving them an opportunity to actually compete with one another. And people had already been doing that with LAN parties, but to actually give it a stage, give it a formal stage, to present on was Global Offensive, and it still is. Global Offensive is still the current Counter-Strike game, and it's 2021. The game's been around for, what is that, 7 years?
I can't believe that you said Counter-Strike's been going on since the 90s.
I
can't believe that. I don't
had
Counter-Strike Source and all that.
Counter-Strike Source, I think, was like 2008, but then we had Counter-Strike.
I think there was just Counter-Strike.
There was just Counter-Strike, which came out in like 1999, I think.
I didn't know that.
And StarCraft was around there.
StarCraft was too, but I think CS:GO, because a lot of people credit the whole crate system and then the loot box system to games like CS:GO. And whether that's true or not, because most games, when they gave you stuff to play with in game, it was items that you could actually use in your game, like things that helped you or whatever. Where CSGO didn't have that. CSGO was basically what a competitive game is, where the game is just a base game. There's nothing that gets added, whether you open 100 crates or not. All you get are skins for guns that already exist that you already have. You didn't get a better gun or a different kind of gun by opening cases. You just got skins. That's all the game had to offer, was skins, gloves, and skins.
The reward wasn't that you played the game more and
got better tools.
And you got better tools. The reward was the dopamine of beating another team.
And having a higher rank. And so I think CSGO gets credit there because, and League had already existed too.
I think that they pushed it in the right direction, but I would say that with where we are now, I think League of Legends did that more.
Yes.
I think that CSGO I think StarCraft did. I think StarCraft doesn't get a lot of credit for what it did, but they had the first big tournaments before CSGO.
Yeah, I remember
$1 million tournaments, and StarCraft and StarCraft 2 were the big ones. But when it came, there was a actual esports crash within the market for a while because everyone got sick of StarCraft, and there was a lot of investment that went in that didn't pay off and things like that. And I think CSGO helped it kind of pull back up. But I think that the difference is that Valve didn't kind of step in for CSGO until recently.
I actually agree. I think Valve
They had
just
the
let it go.
ESL run by like the Sci-Fi Network or something, which had stadiums full of people. I'll admit that. But I think League of Legends and what esports is now, where every company wants a game like Siege to be the new esport, to fill stadiums that they make the money off of people going to stadiums and playing the game competitively, was League. Because League they lose money on Worlds every year. They lose money on the LCS every year because they want to standardize it and make sure that it's in-house to exactly how they want it. But through that, pulls in more players, pulls in people who buy skins, and makes a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So I think that they definitely created
ton of money.
The current kind of what esports is.
No, I agree. CSGO definitely didn't just
I think
carry
that they
the whole
actually
thing.
paved the path, but League walked it.
Well, no, that's what I was trying to say is like where I think the peak was for starting it again was CSGO. Not saying it carried it. Like I'm not saying CSGO has been the spotlight of esports. No, but I think that was a great way of saying it. I think CSGO kind of paved the way again, repaved the road, if you will, and League walked it. I think that's true. Because I remember Major League Gaming, had Modern Warfare 2 tournaments and stuff, but like I'll be honest, anyone who's done those will remember those fondly, but if you take a really big step back, you'll realize that Modern Warfare 1, Modern Warfare 2 tournaments weren't really that big compared to the actual big fish in that pond, such as StarCraft and what became of CSGO.
Well, and I think it also shows who's really going to tournaments anymore to play Modern Warfare 2.
Well, I meant when Modern Warfare 2 came out.
No,
back in 2009.
but that's even what I mean is that they replaced the game within 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
Where CSGO, League of Legends, StarCraft 2 are all still here.
Yeah, they're still here.
And most of those were released before 2010. So, that's insane.
And we can argue the same for CSGO because even though it was created in 2013, it's based on the same mechanics that have existed for the whole decade prior.
Yeah. I actually was going to do this whole documentary series about it back at Evergreen, where it was going to be, I was going to follow Nick Rollo, our friend from high school.
Okay.
During that time, he was going to be a professional Smash player. He took 6 months before he went to college and wanted to become a Smash player.
What game was he playing at the time? Which one was it? Oh, okay.
4, yeah.
And so he went and actually, he became friends with the best Little Mac in the U.S., and
hey, nice.
He lived with him for a little bit and stuff. And I talked to them and I had this whole thing going, and it just turned out that Evergreen didn't help me find a teacher to kind of support the program. But it would be this documentary about these guys don't have orgs behind them. And if they do have an organization behind them, because as a League of Legends player on a daily basis, I'm not talking per se about 2020 and 2021 because there's been some changes, but pre that, you had a team house you lived in, and you had a chef, and all you did was play League of Legends all day, and practice with your team, live with your team, and go to tournaments.
And your org basically financially supported this lifestyle.
They paid you and stuff, but they also financially supported you in the sense of
they paid for your food.
They paid for your food and housing and all this stuff and travel and all this.
Okay, wow.
And so it was financially, I think, in that day and age, and it was only a few years ago, financially stable to become a League of Legends player, because there was a full path where it was, if you're 18, you go join a team, you go play in the LCS if you're in the top players in the US for a couple years, and then you leave that and become a Twitch streamer, and you gain sponsors through that. And it was actually really interesting because I also found it weird where it's the top players aren't playing professionally in League of Legends. Most of the top players don't.
They're just streamers.
Not even that. Some of them aren't. People in the top 10, some of them don't stream right. They just play League of Legends, and they play League of Legends at such a high tier that they are just in the top 10 of players in the U.S., but they just don't do anything with it.
They don't cultivate anything with it, which isn't to say, it's a waste.
But even if they are streamers, they make a lot more money streaming. So it's actually not beneficial to go into the LCS and go professional unless if you feel like you want to prove something. And so that's really interesting. But as a Smash player, he knew people, there were people I was going to interview that they're part of an organization. They're literally signed to a team and they make zero money from it. And the only way that they make money is by streaming a little bit and winning tournaments. And if you I'll just take a random team, Golden Guardians. They have not gone to Worlds in League of Legends. I don't know if do you want me to kind of explain? I'm kind of on.
Are you going to explain who the Golden Guardians are?
No, just kind of whatever. So Golden Guardians are a team in League of Legends, and they haven't gone to the World Championships. I abbreviated to Worlds. I didn't want.
Yeah.
They haven't gone to the World Championships since they've been an organization. However, their team members have been paid financially the same every single year. They have gotten food and housing from the team every single year. The Smash player I was going to interview, do not remember his name because it's been about 5 years, but Smash player I was going to interview, the only way he could make if he went to a tournament, the only way he would make money is if he won. And if he didn't win, that's no money on it. Like
no money.
He's not paying rent. He's not paying rent with that.
No money.
It's a deficit.
No money.
And so that's where Twitch streaming kind of helped. But even then, like it was Smash 4 and he's a little Mac player. He's not getting, hundreds of views. And so he was very living this like thin lifestyle, like this right on the line lifestyle of like he could be in poverty or he could just be living but he loved the sport so much he wanted to do it. And so that was something that was very interesting to me. It was like fighting games hadn't changed. They have changed now, I think, with a lot of them raising in popularity and teams stepping in to financially support people more.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Fighting games were very much either you need to prove that you're worth it, or you need to get out of this.
Or it's good luck.
I mean, I think it makes sense why, because investing wise, when you if you're an organization, when you get a team, even if you want to replace, even if everyone on that team is terrible and you want to replace them, all what you own is the organization they're part of, and so you can just swap people in and out. Whereas I think it's harder to just make an organization with one person in it for fighting games.
Well, it wasn't
and to really just say, because I think you're really investing wholly in that person. Whereas with a team, you can be like, well, I don't like this person, get them out, put someone else in. And that is sort of easier to just kind of back because you can kind of grow that team. Whereas if you have an individual, either they grow or the whole investment falls apart.
Well, and it was also this thing of like organizations had multiple players, right? Mm-hmm. But the only way that the org made money off this player, because every week in the LCS, and I don't know what the abbreviation stands for, it's the League of Legends something series, championship series. The players go out and they have, brands on their jerseys. And so that's money in the pocket of the organization. The organization gets financially
sponsored,
backed by the LCS as well because they're in the LCS.
And
they're given a certain amount of money from Riot Games to financially support the team members. But say you run Panda Gaming, it's a fighting game organization, right? Mm-hmm. How are you making money if a player you have isn't winning tournaments? You don't, because they're not. There's no guarantee that your brand's going to be seen by the camera. There's no guarantee that they're even going to go to a tournament because they have to drive across the country. So the only way that these organizations make money is when the player makes money through winning the tournament. Yeah. And so that's it's so risky. And so teams can't really pay out.
And that's just product placement. Well, it's product placement, but it has that catch to it.
Yeah.
You need to be successful, have the player be successful.
There's no safety net.
There's no safety net like a lot of other, like CSGO and League of Legends has. And that's what made it very interesting to me is like there was this rising sentiment because I think it was the same year that kid won $1 billion in that Fortnite tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
but in a way, that's the same thing. Yes, he won that $1 billion in that tournament, but think about everyone else who had been training in Fortnite to win that tournament and didn't. They don't get anything. No. They have to go home and they just spent thousands of dollars going to this tournament to try to win it, and now they're in debt because they tried to do this and they got nothing out of it. Yeah. So what's the point? And I think that it was interesting to see that dynamic happening where people were like, "Oh, esports is viable now." It's like it's half of it is, yes. But
I think the team-based one is. I think if you're on your own,
the team-based one is. And there's been a lot of changes to fighting games, I think. I think a lot of organizations have stepped up and taken that burden for a lot of the players. And I think it's changed for some of them, but other ones haven't. But I think like Smash Ultimate's super popular compared to Smash 4 on an esports-wise.
For sure.
And so players
Do people still play competitives 4?
Yeah.
Do they?
I don't know.
I'm not sure if there is really tournaments, but I think Yeah, there must be, because I mean there are tournaments for Melee still.
Yeah,
Actually,
but
I would
Melee
say-
has a cult following.
But you
which
got to
is
remember
different.
that Melee has two things going for it. It is one game that hasn't been changed forever, but I think that there's a lot of nostalgia attached to it.
Yes, there is.
Because I'm guessing you didn't play it as a kid, or did you?
No, I did not. I never
And you
owned a
did play
GameCube.
it. You did play it though, but you're not really playing it anymore.
No.
But there's people who have been playing it since it came out,
Yeah.
and they're still playing it.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a lot of nostalgia attachment to it that keeps it alive. Where when Smash Ultimate came out, they're like, "Oh, who cares about Smash 4 anymore?"
Yeah, because it was more.
I sold
it was
my Wii
more,
U the minute that thing came out.
It was
Like,
more similar. Yeah, that's a huge thing. And I think this and we've been talking about this a bunch. It's all been going into this last question I was going to ask, but we've been talking about it a shit ton already. Is competitive gaming and esports healthy? Is it good?
No, I honestly don't think so.
You need to say that louder.
no.
Like, in my opinion, I think like when CSGO did it, as much as I hate CSGO's competitive, and it's funny because you just heard me praise it earlier, but I praised it objectively. Like, I personally hate CSGO's competitive. It is objectively good, but I personally hate it. As much as I hate it, it's fair. Like, you can win matches back. It's got the similar things we're talking about where, like, just because you're down doesn't mean you're out. The enemy has more money, but you get money for losing and you can save some rounds. Teams have developed strategies for what to do when they're on a losing streak. There is a strategy. It's not just, let's give up. I don't see many I don't remember if there was a surrender button in Global Offensive, and don't take that as a sign of I don't know what I'm talking about. Take that as a sign is that didn't happen. Whether there was a button or not, no one surrendered in Global Offensive. You could turn that stuff around. Teams were toxic. They could be toxic, but teams developed strategies to turn things around. And in my opinion, that was brilliantly built. You wouldn't want to surrender. Surrendering really was a bad option. And do I think esports are healthy? I think if it's like Global Offensive, yeah. I think as a league, I mean, do I think there are players who play the game a little too seriously and, is it healthy for them? That's a different question. But, is CSGO competitive as an esport on its own healthy? Yes. Do I think other esports aren't healthy? Yeah, tons. I think there are tons that are unhealthy. I think leagues is pretty unhealthy. And I don't mean just unhealthy for like the team. I think it's unhealthy to the genre. If we're talking about T1 just wiping every time, I think that's a pretty boring industry. I think that is fairly boring. And someone would say, well, they make lots of money. And I'm like, maybe that's just
They won
because
5 years in a row.
I think that may
that's
just be
good
the
for them.
momentum of league existing. I think if league existed 5 years ago and just 5 years in a row from its launch, just the same team wins, I think it would be boring.
Great.
Now, someone could say, well, if an underdog finally wins, it would be that much sweeter. Yeah, I hope that's not 7 years from now. Like, you have to realize, like, as much as the greater the challenge, the higher, the sweeter the taste, there's a limit to that because eventually people will just get bored.
Yeah.
I don't know if people will get bored of League just because it's been around forever, so it's such a staple, but I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's healthy for the industry. I don't think other games should look up to League's example of how to run a competitive scene. I don't think that should be looked up to. And that's what I mean by healthy if you wanted to create a competitive game, look to CSGO. I don't know about contemporary CSGO because actually I don't know much about in the past 2 years. But that's my point is that's healthy. You can use it as an example to create your own. That doesn't mean yours will be good, but it's at least a healthy example. League is an unhealthy example of how to run a league, how to run a competitive.
The problem with it is that it's between natural and forced esports. And
That's true. That's
I think it's that, and this is a rarity for me, so you get to hear this, both of you. I think that Melee is a better esport than most esports. I hate Melee. I'm going to be straight with you, True. I hate Melee.
No, I was almost gonna say that
Like,
too. I was gonna be like, I hate Melee. You just heard the things I just shitted on about it, but I kind of am like, it naturally formed
because it wasn't a game built from the ground up. Like, there's a very good example of this. Valorant. Valorant was built from the ground up to be a competitive shooter, period.
Yeah.
And I think that League of Legends wasn't. I think that there's a lot of bad examples of pivoting. And I think that I will talk about that in a second. But I think Melee is a natural example. Like, people naturally wanted to play it competitively, and then it created a scene. And if there was a game developer behind it who went, okay, let's, tweak some stuff here and there. Let's make sure, I don't know if Jigglypuff's broken, but like, let's make sure that Jigglypuff isn't that broken. And I think that Smash is like that. Like Smash Ultimate is tweaked and balanced, but they don't like gut a character and rework them.
Yeah, they don't.
And I think that they know that the game inherently has a following and a fan base, and then they balance it a little bit. Like, they weren't going to do 2 fighter passes, but because of the popularity, they did 2 fighter passes because they wanted to support the community. And I think versus Forced, and I think my biggest example, yeah, it could be Valorant and stuff like that, but no, it's Rainbow Six Siege. Rainbow Six Siege from the ground up was never built to be a competitive shooter. It had random recoil. It had this stuff where you could rope up buildings and blow open walls, and it was a super fun game, and that's why me and Tony played it, was because it was fun, random. Every match was different. And then they went, all of these companies around the gaming industry went, holy shit, League makes a lot of money. Like, League makes a lot of money.
They're like, let's do it.
And Overwatch was the first one. Blizzard was the first one to step in, and they were putting in millions of dollars to build stadiums and to hire like DJ Khaled to play at the World Championships, and to make all these teams around the world, because they didn't just want the teams to be in the U.S. They have a London team and they have a China
they wanted
team.
Overwatch to
they
become
wanted
a
this
thing.
to be this world renowned thing, but it was forced, and because it was forced, no one cared.
Yeah.
And the people who did look at Overwatch or look at Siege still has a following, but the more that game has been precisely made to be an esport, the less people play it, because they think that if they make the game hyper competitive, that people will want to play it more, when people were already where they need to realize that people will naturally come to a game if it's well made and create. Like, yeah, always make a rank system in a shooter. Like, that's just inherent. Like, I'm not saying don't make a rank system until you have a community. Mm-hmm. Have a rank system, but don't balance the game off the top 200 players. Balance it off the 99% of the players who are giving you most of your money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
really.
I'm sorry. Don't lose your thought. Don't lose your thought. I just want to say this about Siege. A lot of the things that we talked about that Spencer brought up is like random recoil, blowing open walls and stuff, is that a lot of the top competitive players complained about these things. And that's because, RNG isn't fair and skill based or whatever. And all these other things aren't competitively sanctioned. And my issue with it was like, I see a lot of this issue where if the player doesn't have direct control over something, they can't affect it with their skill, and because of that, it makes it not very competitive. And I disagree. I think there's a lot of things, and I'm not saying all games should have these things that prevent someone's skill from influencing them, but I think a very good competitive game should involve things like random recoil, because I think as a really skillful player, you need to be able to deal with that. Life isn't perfect. Games aren't perfect. Real, physical sports aren't perfect either. Things will go wrong. Things will change, and you have to be able to overcome that.
You can kick the ball the same way a million times, but it will go a different direction, inches wise, every time, because the ball's not going to get hit perfectly the same time by your foot every time.
It's measured by millimeters, yeah.
And
you need to be. And the thing is, you need to be able to play like that. You need to be able to figure out how to. If you can't, if your shot, if you think you can make a shot as long as it was specifically perfect to the net, zero distance than any other time you've done it, then that's not a very good shot you should be making. You should get closer to the net so that your margin for error closes because of those slight inches that change in your arc of how you're kicking it. Meaning you need to utilize your skill and strategy making in order to fully be a better player. I think that's a thing in Siege, is that they're removing these things that players can't control. In Siege, there's bomb sites you have to defend. Basically, no bomb site can perfectly be defended.
People don't put hostages in a mode anymore.
Yeah, but you can reinforce walls and stuff. But usually, there's always like one wall that like is just not reinforceable that the enemy can shoot through. Or the game also has characters that can go through reinforced walls. The game doesn't let you have the perfect setup. You have to account for the chaos. You can control most of the chaos usually, but you need to be with your skill. You need to be able to counter any random chaos that isn't.
You need to be able to adapt and respond.
You need to be able to adapt and respond.
I'll say one thing, because I know that you'll go on a rant forever. If someone wants to study how to not do an esport, Rainbow Six Siege is the case study, because it was a fun, balanced game before, and as they've taken...
We'll talk about how the game started.
Well, the game started and it failed on launch because it was badly developed and stuff like that. But these devs came in and they worked on the game, and they had this idea of making a SWAT-based shooter, kind of like where, terrorists versus SWAT. And they had this idea where they wanted to balance the game, where they didn't want to be too sci-fi, but they wanted the game to have randomness and fun and all of this stuff. But they had these specific devs that worked on the game for 2 years. And then they moved them out of the game and brought in these other specific devs. And every map that was made was random and fun, and not every bomb site was the same. Not every location's the same. So you had
not every map will function the same. Like how
not
there's
all
like
the
always
guns
a long
function the
section in
same.
it,
Not all characters function the same. And then they brought in these new devs, and every dev made these square boxes of maps that made sure that they didn't have peek holes or couldn't get shot from the site or do this, do that, do this. And they listened to and I think this is the most important thing, is that they listened to their top players. Now, in my opinion, if I had a job where I had to shovel, dirt all day, right?
Right.
And then my boss came to me and said, "Oh, what do you want to make your job easier?" And I said, "I want an excavator." And he bought it for me. And he said, "I will buy you anything you want to make your job easier." Then I would be like, "I want a private servant who feeds me water. I want this. I want that. I want this." These players play this game for a job. It should not be easy to do, and nor shall
because it's an esport,
because it's an esport.
It has to
Nor
be
shall they
challenging.
say what needs to change, because that makes their job easier, and that's not how you should balance the game. The game should not be balanced towards players that are making money off of it.
It would be a lot better. It would be a lot easier to be an esports player if you just didn't have to worry about random recoil, or if the game was all just gray, so there were no custom skins.
You can't climb walls anymore, which is something that the esports players want.
less chaos
You
there
can't
is.
wear certain outfits anymore, which is what they want. You can't. Random recoil is gone. Certain characters are heavily nerfed. All of this stuff, and it's like, your job shouldn't get easier because you want it to be. Like, that's not how life works.
Yeah.
But
Especially in
sure.
the scene, maybe
no,
for the
it
guy
just-
digging
and
a
it
hole, it
plays-
should be. But in this case, no. It's like, you're here because you're supposed to be the best of the best players. If we have to make your job easier so that you can just not work as hard, that defeats the point of being in a competitive league. It'd be a lot easier in football to win if each quarterback had an M16 with a 30-round mag to shoot the enemy team with. Yeah, that would be a lot easier, but that's not... I don't care how many touchdowns you get. People be like, "See, I got more touchdowns by shooting the enemy team." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you missed the point. You're supposed to overcome the challenge of the rules that are already established in the game." That's not me saying rules can't be established, but I'm like, that's the point. You're supposed to be able to deal with random recoil. You're supposed to deal with the fact that walls blow up and you can't always get the perfect site, and that the maps aren't cookie cutter, and some of them function weird. And that's where Spencer's point is great. It's like, that's why you don't get your changes, your patch notes
from your
top 200 players, because they're looking to make it easier. It's a lot easier to secure your position in your job in a sports setting when you don't have to do as much. If quarterbacks don't have to worry about their throws and can just worry about shooting the enemy team so that they don't have to do as much, yeah, they would ask that if they could just eliminate players from the enemy team, and I'm sure quarterbacks would ask for that. It would make their job so much easier. But that's not the point.
And eliminate the amount of challenge of keeping up your skills to the point where it's just like, these guys, all these professional players want are a gray box with a gray gun that has the same recoil pattern. That's all they want. And it's like, no, it just comes down to, it's two things. And I don't want to go into, again, like going on this huge rant, but it's one, don't listen to your top players because of two things. One, they'll always want the game to be easier for them, but also harder for people below them so that they can secure their position. Yeah. The 99% of the rest of the community pays the bills for those servers to be on. And so maybe you should, I'm not saying balance the game for the bronze level player who doesn't know what they're doing, but listen to who's playing at your peak level, where most of your players are, and balance around that. Because if you simply balance around what the top 200 players want, the rest of your community will leave. I'm playing for a while.
No, I think those were all important points.
Everyone listening at home, let me know what you think on the Twitter or in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, about what you think about esports competitive gaming, about all the questions that I've asked today, especially the last question about is it healthy or not. I would love to hear your feedback. Again, thanks everyone for joining me, and thank you for listening, and we will see you guys next time. See ya.
Bye-bye.